Holding on to muscle mass and strength whilst running 20 plus miles a week can be challenging. Is this how you maintain muscle mass? Maybe not. But what about this? Well, it still feels like we've got a bit of work to do. However, through trial and error, I've discovered the 5 definitive and foolproof methods to achieve just this. So keep watching to find out exactly what they are. Yeah, it's nothing to do with any of this rubbish. I just needed an intro. I've only got back into running fairly recently, since I moved to New Zealand in January 2023. I love being outdoors and I love the way running makes me feel. I'm steadily trying to up my weekly mileage, and when I return to the UK next year, I'm planning on competing in a few different ultramarathons. But I have different interests too. I enjoy lifting weights and I enjoy not feeling completely drowned in a medium-sized t-shirt. Full disclosure, this is probably the tightest medium-sized t-shirt I do own, but I digress. So, how do I combine these two things? On the one hand, trying to maintain muscle mass and strength, which has taken me months or even years to build in the first place, whilst also putting myself through hours and hours of possibly catabolic or muscle burning cardiovascular exercise each week. Well, I hope that throughout this video, you'll possibly learn something, and that'll give you a few good tips so that you can do just that. First of all, a little disclaimer. I'm not a strength and conditioning coach, and I'm not a personal trainer. I am actually a qualified doctor, but if you think that my ability to diagnose and treat your grand's urine infection makes me more qualified to give you running and weightlifting training advice, then unfortunately you're mistaken. That being said, I do have a background in powerlifting, and I've entered and even won a couple of competitions. That was a few years ago before I had a big surgery on my left shoulder, and before the COVID pandemic shut down all the gyms, and I lost all of my gains. But just so that I'm being fully transparent, I feel like I should show you where I'm currently at with my own strength training after 6 months of pretty regular running, where I've even managed to hit a new 5k PB. I even did a video about it up here. Then you can at least make an informed decision about whether or not you think it's worth watching the rest of the video. On that note though, seriously, please like and subscribe. Thankfully, my CrossFit gym is actually having a PB day today, where they get all the athletes in to try and have a go at the fabled records board. I don't think that I'll be breaking any of my own barbell personal best today, but during my last powerlifting competition, I doubt I could have even walked 5k without taking a break in the middle, let alone go sub 20 minutes. So let's see how I get on. Right, I'm back. And surprise, surprise, there weren't any new personal bests. But I was pretty happy with how I got on, considering that I hadn't been training specifically for the squat, bench or deadlift for at least 9 months. I'm also sitting at a considerably lower body weight compared to when I set my original personal bests a few years ago now. And considering how much fitter and more athletic I am as a result of my running training, I'm pretty happy with where I am right now. But I like to think that I'm at least above average when it comes to strength and muscle mass for someone my age who can also run a 5k in under 20 minutes. I hope that given my relative mediocrity compared to some other fitness influencers, my advice is slightly more authentic and more relatable to some of you. Anyway, moving on now to the advice. To be the most efficient middle or long distance runner, you want to be as light as possible. You want to have muscles that are conditioned to perform thousands of repeated steps, one after the other, primarily recruiting slow twitch muscle fibres. Unfortunately, this is the complete opposite to what you need to do to maintain muscle mass or strength. You want to be recruiting fast twitch muscle fibres, which make up the majority of a muscle's size and weight. And in order to do this, you need to be doing some form of resistance training. The easiest and most practical way for most people is to go to the gym and lift some moderately heavy weights. I would strongly recommend that in your training you integrate some form of squat, a pressing movement and a deadlift. These 3 lifts are the cornerstone of any strength training program and are what you might call compound movements. This means that these movements are using several different muscle groups all at once instead of isolating a single muscle like a bicep curl or a leg extension might. These will provide the most bang for your buck as you're using multiple muscle groups at once and therefore able to lift heavier weights than if you were just isolating a single muscle. To maintain muscle mass, it's probably best to be lifting some form of moderately heavy weight for at least 3 or 4 sets, moving between 5 and 10 reps per set. You want to be lifting a weight that's moderately challenging for you, but that you could always squeeze out 1 or 2 extra reps at the end of each set if you absolutely had to. By doing this, you're going to be providing a decent stimulus to several different muscle groups all at once, and means that you're going to be in and out of the gym much faster. Making sure that you're not performing each set to complete failure means that you're going to probably keep better form throughout each rep, and also you're going to reduce your risk of injury. Obviously, there are other forms of resistance training, such as bodyweight training, but I tend to find that these work for a narrower range of people. Also, bodyweight movements tend to be harder to scale up once you're getting that bit stronger, whereas with weight training and barbell movements, you can always just add another plate on. Nice quick one, get enough sleep in. Your body needs sleep to recover, and the more exercise and stress that you put it through, the more it's going to need. This is probably one of the biggest factors that most people slip up on when it comes to their training. We all lead busy lives, and sleep's the easiest and therefore usually the first thing to get dropped when we need to fit more into a busy schedule. You don't need to go overboard, and aiming for about 8 hours each night is a realistic goal for most people. Anything over that is unlikely to make a significant difference for anyone other than an elite athlete. Just know that if you're not managing a minimum of at least 6 hours a night, your goals of maintaining muscle mass and improving your cardiovascular fitness are likely going to suffer, and you'll be fighting an uphill battle. Tip number 3, make sure you eat enough. Running burns a lot of calories. The other day I went for an 11-mile run and my Apple Watch reckoned that I burned over 1,000 calories doing so. I then needed to make sure that I was eating enough that day to make up for the extra energy use on top of just my minimum calorie requirements. It's easy to underestimate your food requirements, and once you're throwing a longer run into your schedule once or twice a week, that's potentially 2,000 or 3,000 extra calories that you need to account for. It's far easier to eat more food to make up for those burned calories, rather than losing the weight and the muscle mass and having to rebuild it in the future. There are hundreds of online tools which help estimate your daily calorie requirements based on your height, weight, age and gender. These estimate how many calories your body needs if you were to lie in bed all day, not moving or thinking particularly hard about anything, or what I call a Sunday. You should then be aware of how much activity you're doing above and beyond this minimum calorie requirement and factor that into your weekly diet. I've never been a huge fan of calorie counting, but I am loosely aware of what I need to eat to maintain my current weight. And therefore, when I've done a long run or a heavy gym session that day, I always factor in an extra meal to make up for the calories burned. Also, you need to ensure that you're eating enough protein. I could make a whole nother video about this topic, but it's pretty dull, so I'll skim over it pretty quickly. Basically, proteins are the building blocks of muscles and are required to help recover after resistance training or cardiovascular exercise. This here is a good target to aim for. If you're particularly heavy on the resistance training, or you're over the age of 40, then you want to probably be aiming for this side of the range. That's because your protein requirements are going to be higher than the average runner. That is, if you're wanting to maintain muscle mass as a key goal of yours. When it comes to trying to hold down multiple interests or hobbies at once, naturally it's going to be more difficult to be the best that you can at both of these things at the same time. Like if you look at World's Strongest Man, these guys are not going to be running 20 plus miles a week or even capable of finishing an ultramarathon. And on the other side of things, if you're looking at all-time marathon great Eliud Kipchoge, well, he's not going to be winning many arm wrestles or powerlifting competitions anytime soon. So if you want to be maintaining a decent level of muscle mass while increasing your fitness and endurance levels as a runner, well, it's going to be hard to do these to the best of your ability at all times. That's why it's important to 1, understand your current circumstances, and 2, be setting priorities and goals for the medium and long term and adapt your training accordingly. For example, for me, I'm almost at the end of my time in New Zealand, and I'm about to head on a tour of Southeast Asia with my wife. Running will be easy to keep up with, as I know no matter how remote I am, I can do it anywhere. But I know that over the next few months, it's going to be hard to regularly access a gym. That being said, my current goals over the next few months are primarily running based. I want to set some new PBs in the 5 and 10k, and after that, I'm going to set my sight on these ultramarathons when I'm back in the UK. So when I understand what my circumstances are, and I can match them up with my priorities over the next few months, I can adapt my training accordingly and make sure that it's primarily running focused. In the background, I'll be doing the most that I can to maintain muscle mass. I'll be eating enough food and making sure that I'm not sitting in a calorie deficit. I'll aim to get 8 hours of sleep a night, and I'll throw in some bodyweight training sessions a few times a week and make it to a gym whenever I can. But by taking the above steps to maintain as much muscle mass and strength as I can, I know that in a few months' time, when I refocus my efforts back on strength training, I'll be in a much better position. That being said, your current circumstances and goals might be different to mine. Maybe you've got a summer holiday coming up, which you want to get beach ready for, or you've almost hit that bench press or deadlift target that you've had your eye on for a while. Well, that's fine. Just adjust your training accordingly. Don't get injured. This is clearly easier said than done. Injuries are often inevitable and part and parcel of doing regular exercise. But injuries are going to have huge impacts on your enjoyment and quality of your training, and are often preventable. I've suffered with shoulder and hamstring injuries in the past, and I still do to this day, and that's often as a result of not warming up properly or training at too high an intensity for way too long. The resulting time out of the gym makes it exponentially more difficult to maintain muscle mass and strength. Some common rules to live by with both your running and strength training: always warm up, especially before high intensity workouts where you're going to be lifting more or running faster than you usually do. Don't increase your running or your lifting volume by more than 10% each week. That means that if you ran 20 miles this week, try not to go much higher than 22 miles next week if that is your goal to be pushing the distance. Or if you did 3 sets of 6 reps of 100 kilograms on the squat last week, make sure you're not going to be lifting more than 120% of this volume when it comes to next week's session. And finally, if you're feeling particularly tired or worn down after a heavy bout of training, it's okay to take a day, 2 days, or even a week off. It's likely just going to be helping you in the long run, meaning that your training is much more sustainable, helping you to lift more and run faster way into the future. Exercise and training, at least for me, is a lifestyle. I'm not just here for a short time, I'm here for a long time. I'm looking at people like Mark Lewis, and I'm thinking, right, in 23 years' time, am I going to be at his level or better? Well, I bloody well hope so. Well, that's pretty much it for my 5 quick tips, but just a final thought to leave you on. For a long time, large portions of the online fitness industry have been perpetuating the myth that doing regular cardiovascular exercise is going to be detrimental to your goal of maintaining or building muscle mass and strength. I know this is how I used to think as a teenager, getting all of my information about weightlifting and training from YouTube. All you'd hear everywhere was that cardio was going to kill your gains. But again, it's all about understanding your own priorities and your circumstances. Most people aren't professional bodybuilders looking to pack on as much useless muscle mass as physically possible at the detriment of their cardiovascular health or longevity as athletes. That's not to criticise bodybuilders. They have their own goals, but for the most part, these aren't the same as the average runner or weightlifter. So don't get their hyper-specific training methods confused with universal advice applicable to everyone. It is more than possible to maintain or even build muscle mass and strength alongside having solid cardiovascular fitness. And it is generally a much healthier and more sustainable way of training for the average athlete compared to exclusively or obsessively focusing on one or the other. Right, that's all for today, but if you enjoyed the video, please drop it a like and consider subscribing, and I'll see you again next time.